1995, I had a summer internship, my second one with the Environmental Protection Agency. The summer before, in 1994, I was in North Carolina working for the Office of Environmental Criterion and Assessment, which is just as interesting as it sounds. But the following year, I was able to leverage my senior thesis in college to get the job of my dreams, and that was to serve as an intern in the newly created Office of Environmental Justice. I grew up in Mississippi near Moss Point. I grew up in Gulfport. Moss Point was an area that was facing chemical degradation because of plants that poured waste into communities, in toxic air and in the water. We were a state away from what was known as Chemical Alley in Louisiana, where the rates of death and disease were astronomical compared to the size of the population. And so for me, the conversation about the environment is one that's been a long time in building. It's not the thing I'm most known for, but it is something so central to me that during my tenure in the legislature, I made it a point to introduce and support multiple pieces of legislation to act on our climate, to act on our environment. It also matters to me because I grew up on the Gulf Coast, and I remember the hurricanes. I was born after Hurricane Camille, but I remember Hurricane George and Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Frederick. I remember driving home in 2005 to check on my parents who had been victims of Hurricane Katrina, praying all the way there that it wasn't as bad as we believed. And those extreme climate events are not relegated to the Gulf of Mexico in Mississippi and Louisiana. Here in Georgia in 2018, Hurricane Michael ravaged our state. And the reality is extreme weather events are only going to increase. The reality is that the environment is not fixing itself, and that wishing does not make it so. We have to act. It is our obligation to take our power and fix our climate and save our world, and that's why we're here today. And the reality is, 27 years after I walked into the Office of Environmental Justice in Washington, D.C. in Anacostia, I'm standing on a stage knowing that we are inches away from some of the most major investment in climate action in our history. You see, with Build Back Better, with that agenda, we can invest billions of dollars in actually addressing the human cost of climate action. We can help improve the lives of families, making certain that not only we help prepare them for extreme weather events, we can do the work of making sure they have sustainable jobs that pay living, if not better wages, to save our planet. And when you couple that with the physical plant work that will happen with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, together we can transform the United States and we can take our rightful place as a leader on climate action. Now, many of you know me from conversations about voting rights, something that's a little important to me. But the reality is I care about voting rights not simply because of the act of casting a ballot. It's about making choices. It's about setting an agenda. It is about shaping the world we want to have in this country and around the world, beginning with where we live. And as a resident of Georgia, as a person who calls Georgia home, I believe that Georgia should be at the forefront of what is to come. You see, Georgia's already in the top 10 states when it comes to solar energy. We're in the top 20 on so many other metrics, but we should be number one. Because in the Southeast, we know what we're doing, and in Georgia, we can get this work done if we invest in our state. And we have extraordinary leaders who are doing this work. And let's be clear, this is bipartisan work. Climate action doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't care whether you live in Atlanta, in Athens, in Ackworth, and it doesn't care if you live in Albany. Climate change is real, it is happening, and we can either use it to help ourselves or we can give in. In Georgia, we don't give in. We give our best. And that is why these two bills are going to be critical in transforming our state and changing our nation. But it doesn't happen if we don't lift up our voices, if we don't do the work of telling our legislative leaders, especially those in the Senate, that action has to be taken now. We've got to call our state reps and tell them that at the state level, there's work to be done. We've got to call our U.S. representatives and tell each and every one of them, regardless of who they represent, they speak for all of us. And it is our obligation to tell them we want to build back better, and we want the bipartisan infrastructure framework to pass. Together, we can invest in the future. But what's even more important is we can act now.